Thank you very much, Romany, and good morning to everybody. My name is Richard Mukheibir. I'm the CEO of Cash Converters Southern Africa. I'm broadcasting to you from Midrand, our head office, in a cold and wintry and theoretically gonna rain sometime today in Joburg, which is not supposed to happen, but anyway, that's going to happen, I think. Who are Cash Converters? We're effectively a global network of franchise stores offering pawnbroking, micro-lending, and the trading in second-hand fine jewelry and household goods. I have been with the business from effectively day one. We opened the first store in Parow in Cape Town in October of 1994. And we now operate, we have operated internationally. Business started out in Australia in 1984. It's in 22 countries around the world. We operate in South Africa, Namibia, and we've just opened our first store in Lagos in Nigeria. To talk to a bit of the further introduction in the context of questions of how do you handle risk, from our perspective, it's a relatively simple approach. We try to increase alternatives and reduce dependencies when we deal with risk. And in that context, I'll explain a little bit more about it in my presentation today. But I'm really chuffed to be here today, and I'm really encouraged that the emphasis on culture has been so strong, because we do believe it is fundamental to building a sustainable business. So I just need to do some technology here and get rid of a screen out of there and get rid of myself, I think, because I'm looking at myself, which is a bit scary. And then I want to start up a presentation. I will try to ensure that I don't bore you to death or kill you with PowerPoint, but I'm going to run through this as quick as I can. I believe I've got 20 minutes, and then we'll do a bit of Q&A if you're interested. I've tried to talk to the topic of building resilience in your business model, effectively to ensure sustainability and growth. I suspect that you could probably write a doctoral thesis on this topic. So what I've tried to do is squash it into 20 minutes and deal with those issues that I think are important. Romany, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
No, we don't. So
no, we can't. Okay. So I've got to push. There we go. Okay, and I've got to share sound. Yes, thank you very much. Okie-dokie. How's that looking now?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Right. So the topic really is exactly that. How do we go about building a sustainable business? And now I've lost half of my screen. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. I do need to see that one. Okay, fantastic. Romany, please just confirm that you can see that presentation screen.
Yes.
Okay, so let's dive into this, guys. Right, so I'm going to deal with effectively 4 topics: creating a culture, and that's why I was really encouraged that people were focusing on this in the context of building resilience. We also believe in our business that understanding why we exist is really important. It forms a foundational part of doing what we do. We think then that you need to build a team around you that is culturally fitting and understands what they need to do, why they're doing it, and how they help in achieving it. And then finally, I'll just wrap up on dealing with risk, which is part of this whole process of building a sustainable business. So let's just start with culture. And in fact, I thought it might be a good idea to try and understand what it is. And I've heard it described as how things get done around here. Effectively, somebody like Peter Drucker would tell you that culture eats strategy for breakfast, in the context of what needs to be done. But the culture is the bedrock of how it gets done. And effectively, the foundation of what culture really is, or how it starts, is aligned really along the lines of a range of values. So as an example, we'll use Cash Converters as an example over here. What are the values of the Cash Converter business? They revolve around passion, professionalism, integrity, respect, and collaboration. They're effectively deeply ingrained principles that guide a company's actions, and they serve as the foundation of culture in the business. what I have found over the years of operating in the franchise industry, that culture generally emanates from the top. So whoever's running that particular business unit drives the culture of that organization. Now, it's interesting. Cash Converters is an operation that operates, as I mentioned, in 25 countries across the world. I was fortunate enough to attend a franchisor conference in Paris last year with all the franchisors around the country or around the world. And whether the franchisor came from Spain or Portugal or New Zealand or the UK, these 5 values effectively formed the basis of the culture of all of their organizations. And so you could really see, although we operate independent of each other, you could really see that it was a cohesive cultural cornerstone that we all understood and we all effectively respected. So, as an example, if professionalism is one of the cornerstones of your company's culture, then things like arriving at meetings when you said you would arrive at meetings are important. Things like arriving at time are important. Preparation for meetings are important, and delivering the outcome to your best ability the first time is important. So I would argue that in order to build resilience in your business, you've got to consciously think about your culture. We went through a process to formalize this with these values many, many years ago. And as Lerato mentioned to you earlier, it forms part of everything that we do. And maybe just before I move on, how we use this as a tool is we reflect decision-making against each one of those values or our culture overall when we have to make judgment calls. Now, things operationally are generally very simple, but when you need to make a judgment call, that call that you're making, is it value set compliant? In other words, does it comply to the set of values and the culture of the company when one needs to make a judgment call in the context of something that may well be difficult? Disciplining an employee, firing an employee, is the way that you deal with that process value set compliant and therefore compliant to your culture or not? So it in our view would probably rate as the most important cornerstone of building resilience into your business. So there you go. That's effectively the first suggestion I would give. The next is really understanding your why, and what are we saying about this, or what do we actually mean about this? So I'm going to suggest to you that what is the purpose of the business? Why does it effectively exist? And you may be familiar with a management consultant by the name of Simon Sinek. He's an American chap who has built a relatively simple model to explain to people the importance of why in a business. And he talks about the 3 circles, and I'm just going to put these up here: why, how, and what. And generally speaking, in a business, there would be very few people that don't understand what they do. They equally understand how they do it, but fundamentally, unless you understand why you do what you do and how you do it, you don't really get the long-term benefit of really understanding why. And in that context, I've got a short video that I've taken off TED just to explain it. Simon Sinek explains it much better than I do. So I'm going to show you this, and then we'll move on from there.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. When we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will anybody...
Okay, so understanding the why is really important. Maybe just to summarize again what Cynic has to say about Apple. The three circles, working from the inside out: why, how, and what. And the why of Apple. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We think differently. For those of you that maybe is on the age side as I am, Apple is a relatively new company in the world. I don't think it's owned or been around for longer than 20, maybe 25 years. But it is so ingrained in our culture these days that we can't think of a world without Apple. How do they do what they do? We make beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly computers, iPads, iPods, whatever. And what do? They make beautiful computers. I thought it may be interesting just to share a few other examples with you. And for those of you that are rugby fans and may have watched the game last Saturday in New Zealand, and clearly if you are a rugby fan and as a South African, a fan of the Springboks, these guys are the arch enemy. And they, in a country of 4.5 million people, have a better track record against the Springboks in a country of 65. And you've got to ask the question why. Okay, so if we apply this model to rugby, or specifically to the All Blacks, what do you think their why is? Why do you think they do what they do? Clearly, that's a rhetorical question because the technology is not going to allow an answer. But the why is actually fascinating to me. It's to unite and inspire New Zealand. That's it. Okay. What they add to that is they say each and every individual wants to leave the jersey in a better place than they found it. Yeah, I think that's just incredibly inspiring. How do they do it? We train as a team to win. And we all know what they do. They play rugby. Isn't that amazing? So they effectively spent a lot of time trying to understand why they do what they do, and as a consequence, have a track record of winning far beyond what they should have in the context of their population on the planet. Just one other example quickly. I'll give you a cash converter example as to what we do in terms of our why, how, and what. So why we exist: to help people get on with their lives. It's as simple as that. Cash converters exist to help people get on with their lives. How do we do it? We provide them with access to cash. And what do? We buy, we sell, and we loan cash. Simple as that. So I would argue the second aspect over there is understanding your why. If you understand your why, then the resilience in your business will be a lot better than those companies that don't. Okay, let's move on. Building a team. So I thought as well, it might be a good idea just to understand what a team is. So the classic definition of a team is 2 or more people who share a common objective, know what their role is to help get there, and work together to achieve it. So it's a relatively simple construct. It effectively means it's more than one person. They've got a common objective. Each of them know what they need to do to achieve that objective. You could apply that to a rugby team as well. In fact, you can apply it to any team. So how do we go about building this team? And I think we've argued before, in our context, we always seek out the common values, and then we train the skills that are complementary to those people in the team that don't have those particular skills. So sometimes I use an analogy when building a business that it's similar to building a puzzle. You need all the pieces in the puzzle, and you've got to put them in the right place in order to get the picture. So the pieces are, as an example, every business needs marketing, every business needs finance and admin. And those 2 skills are dramatically different in the context of left and right brain. But you need to have the people on your team with common values and those complementary skills so that you can effectively deliver the objective. Very, very, very important. So I thought one way of describing or showing or using an example of building a team is actually using a country and how they achieved what they did in the context of taking a country that was effectively third world prior to them building this team and implementing this value set, and within one generation created a first world country. So let's just move on over there. And effectively their 3 values that they built a first world country on was what they referred to as meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. And for those of you that play this Wordle game on a morning basis, which started out during COVID, you may be familiar with Wordle. And a Wordle is guessing a country on a daily basis by effectively providing a shape of the country. I'm not sure how many people know that this country. It is a country. It's effectively a small country off the tip of Asia. And this country is Singapore. So what I'm going to do here is effectively show you another short video of an explanation of how Singapore created a culture based on a set of values to deliver a first world country from a third world country in effectively what accounted for a generation. So I'm going to play you this video quickly. I'm actually going to
I was born in
move it a little
Singapore.
bit. Sorry. Yeah.
I was born in Singapore on 24th October 1948. We tell the students that if you implement this secret formula, your country will succeed. And I capture the secret formula with the acronym in English, MPH. The M stands for meritocracy. Meritocracy means that you select the best people to run the country. And what brings many countries down, especially in the third world, is that when it comes to selecting the finance minister or the economics minister, they will give their jobs to their brothers, their cousins, their uncles, their relatives, and not to the best people. And Singapore did the exact opposite.
But the import of this is, how did a country at a country level go from a third world country to a first world country? It created a set of values that they could commonly build their team around. And just as an aside, let's have a look, see what South Africa has done in the almost 30 years of democracy. We've employed cadre deployment. We've focused on racial division. We have been absorbed by ideology, and we have been fundamentally dishonest. And just for those of you that spell much better than me, I did it for this particular reason, because that's the outcome. And just imagine if we could create an environment in South Africa that we could weld our country around a set of values that can deliver the same output in a generation as Singapore did. So there you go on building your team, which is critically important in terms of resilience and building a business. Last aspect I want to deal with is, how do we deal with risk?
First pillar of Singapore's secret formula. The second pillar is P, and P stands for pragmatism. Pragmatism is an English word, and it's an English concept. But the best definition of pragmatism was given by China's leader, Mr. Deng Xiaoping, when he said it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or a cat is white. If the cat catches mice, it is a good cat. So in the same way, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. If it works, you use it. So Singapore was very pragmatic. So it would take some policies that are capitalist and some policies that are socialist, and it would mix them up. And that's what pragmatism is about. You're not bound by any ideology. But the third pillar, the H, is of course the hardest to achieve, because H stands for honesty. And indeed, what has brought most third world countries down and what has led to their failures in development has been corruption. And so Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, after he became Prime Minister, made it a point to punish not the junior people, but the very senior people. So when a deputy minister went on holiday with his friend, a businessman, when he came back, he was arrested. And so he said, "Why am I being arrested?" He says, "You went on a holiday with the businessman, he paid all your expenses, that's corruption. You go to jail." So when a deputy minister is sent to jail, then everybody says, "Oops, I got to be careful, I can also go to jail." So that honesty factor is one critical reason why Singapore has been exceptionally successful. So it's a combination of meritocracy, pragmatism.
Guys, I'm going to move on because you can get all of these videos off the internet anyway. But the import of this is, how did a country at a country level go from a third world country to a first world country? It created a set of values that they could commonly build their team around. And just as an aside, let's have a look, see what South Africa has done in the almost 30 years of democracy. We've employed cadre deployment. We've focused on racial division. We have been absorbed by ideology, and we have been fundamentally dishonest. And just for those of you that spell much better than me, I did it for this particular reason, because that's the outcome. And just imagine if we could create an environment in South Africa that we could weld our country around a set of values that can deliver the same output in a generation as Singapore did. So there you go on building your team, which is critically important in terms of resilience in building a business. Last aspect I want to deal with is how do we deal with risk? Again, just a quick definition. Risk is effectively a situation involving exposure to danger, harm, or loss. And in the context of a business, I suppose to a large degree, it has to do with a focus on how do I mitigate loss in the organization. This little model effectively comes from a well-known South African businessman who's applied this philosophy through his time in business, a chap by the name of Doug Smollen. He started out as a youngster in his early 20s, packing shelves effectively in retailers, and has now built an international business with over 200,000 employees across many countries in the world. A really impressive South African guy's name's Doug Smollen, and his one philosophy that he runs his business on effectively is to increase alternatives while reducing dependencies. And what do we actually mean by that at a very high level? Let's use electricity as an example. We as a country are dependent on Eskom to produce electricity. As a consequence of that, the risk of something going wrong at Eskom could cause a downstream problem in our world, which is exactly what's come out. So we've had one major supplier supplying electricity in South Africa. How do you go about mitigating that loss or reducing that risk? Is effectively reducing the dependency on that one major supplier. And that's exactly what's happening in the country at the moment. The private-public environment, the production of farms, PV farms and the like, all the production of energy coming on stream outside of the government is going to resolve the issue associated with one major supplier supplying power into South Africa. If we take it into another example, maybe in the franchising space, one or a few franchisees owning a large amount of a network or a branded network could become a major risk if something happens to one of those franchisees. So again, the focus should be to increase the alternatives and reduce the dependencies as you make a decision every time around a business decision needed to be made. In terms of geography, how do we go about reducing risk in geography? Well, if you've got a specific regional risk and you're only focused on, let's say, the Western Cape as an example, to reduce the risk of any issues associated with what is going on in the Western Cape, you might want to increase your network and start growing a network somewhere outside of the Western Cape, Gauteng or KZN or whatever it might be, and extrapolate that into a country region. You might want to start developing your business outside of a country so that you effectively are increasing your alternatives, you're increasing the amount of countries your brand is represented in, and at the same time reducing the dependencies of where you are represented. So guys, that's basically the 4 topics that I wanted to chat to you about in the context of building resilience in your business. Just to wrap up quickly, roles between the two parties. The franchisor's role is about sustainability and growth, and sustainability really is about building resilience in your business. The franchisee's role effectively in the business is to run the business according to the model. And the recognition that these two parties in the relationship have a symbiotic relationship. In other words, the one person's success translates into the other entity's success, and they add value to each other so that the symbiosis delivers not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 equaling to more than 2. If that relationship is recognized, and if there's value in both of those environments, and if people have common values and those complementary skills, the one party running the business according to the model, and the other party ensuring that there's sustainability and growth, in other words, increasing alternatives, reducing dependencies, building the model as you go along, then the relationship works really well. And effectively, what you need to do between those two parties is look after each other. You've got to look after each other because it is symbiotic, and your success translates into my success. And so we're effectively part of the same team. I would argue then that if you implement as many of the concepts that we've discussed today into your business, you should have a sustainable business. You should have resilience in your business, and I trust that you will have a business for decades to come. So that's effectively me. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back over to Romany.
Thank you, Richard. Lots of food for thought, I have to say. Very interesting. And yeah, has anybody got any questions for Richard? You can just raise your hand.
I can't raise my hand. Can I just go?
Yes, go for it, Rose.
I don't know. Normally there's a hand thing, but there doesn't seem to be one. I don't know. Maybe I need to upgrade my system or something. Richard, thank you. That was awesome. And I love that thing about the why. I heard that years ago and I'd forgotten about it. So thank you for that reminder. What I'm curious to know is, in terms of your values in the business, how do you kind of communicate that to the people on the ground, so to speak, like the people that are in the stores? Because a lot of the time companies have amazing values, but all it is really is like a poster on the wall, as I'm sure you know. So I'd be curious to know how do you kind of embed it in your business? Because I think 100% agree with you that you know, from a resilience and sustainability point of view, people like to know what they're in, and so yes. I'm curious to know how you do that.
So the theory at head office, whether it ends up at store land and a customer facing individual, is in fact the really difficult part of it. It's how do you operationalize all the strategy and get it effectively implemented as part of the culture in the organization. And Roz, I've made more mistakes in running a business than most people over the last 30 years. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's a spotlessly run organization and everything works perfectly according to how I would like it. But the reality of it is that you, if culturally, the reality is that you every individual in the organization needs to model the culture. And it starts with me in this instance, because I'm the CEO. So if I am not showing and displaying the values of passion and professionalism and integrity and respect and collaboration in every instance that I interact with a fellow human being, well, then it's simply not going to occur. So it starts from the top, I think, is what I'm saying. And thereafter, you build models and procedures and practices into your organization to effectively try and ensure that it gets down to I don't like the phrase, but the lowest employee in the organization, who's generally the most important because they're interfacing with your customers. So in our instance, retail environment, our salespeople or our people in our personal finance centers or in our buy shops and things like that. So cut a long story, it's about to be load shedded, so I might have gone dark, but you should still be able to hear me. Our generators should kick in shortly. Do you love that?
Yeah, load shedded as well.
Okay. So the IP of our business is encapsulated in our e-learning program. We have a training department of 5 people who make our own content. And so we have training courses on our values and our culture. And when we induct people into the business, we spend time, in fact, of a 2-week theoretical program of our new franchisees, half a day is spent on values. And, and between myself and my colleague who does our franchise selection process, we will not bring anybody into our organization that doesn't reflect those values. It's a complete showstopper, because we absolutely know that if we do, we've got problems down the line that we're just creating for our operational team. And at some point in time, the relationship is going to flounder because they simply don't have a set of common values. And I'm proud to tell you that the first franchisee I signed in 1994 is still with us today. Next year will be his 30th anniversary.
Wow.
of running a cash converters. And yes, so we really do think that relationships are very important, and they're founded on common values.
Yeah.
So,
no, I love that. Thanks. Because I often do material development for clients, and for me, I'm so passionate about making sure that everyone knows what the values are, and it's not, otherwise there's no point in having them,
Yes,
and it also, for me, kind of guides people's behavior. That's why I love that video, that Singapore video, where he said, this is what you actually have, this is the behavior that we want that's linked to those values. It's not just a list of words that sometimes people can't really conceptualize. So thank you for that. It was awesome. I really enjoyed your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roz. Has anyone else got a question for? Okay, just going to move. I say
yes, please.
I've got you, Cynthia. I'm going to get you on the screen now. Cynthia? And Ava, did you have a question? Here we go.
Yeah, Cynthia can go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed it myself as well. I think when you spoke about the functions of the franchisor and the franchisee, I think that's what differentiates this model from the normal business. But also a question of mine is, when you said the franchisees, obviously for them to be successful is to follow the model. I've seen with other brands, I'm not sure exactly with Cash Converters, where when they admit somebody into the group, one of the requirements would be that they have some exposure or some experience. So I was wondering now, after hearing this, because to me sounds like as long as you follow the business model, you should be fine. Is a need for that experience if you want to join into the group? Thanks.
So Cynthia, thanks very much for the question. It goes to the foundation of franchising, actually, because franchising is a business model that effectively distributes products or services. And the context of it is that the franchisor has a proven business model and a brand, and the franchisee takes that proven business model and executes it. It's similar to baking a cake. The franchisor is the guy who's got the recipe and the method, and the franchisee then creates and operationalizes how to bake that cake. In our experience, it's just so fundamental. Every time we've had maybe I'll deal with it in the context of the problems. Every time we've had a problem, we've recognized that the individual franchisee is not following the system. Maybe use a quick service restaurant example. I might like hamburgers with beetroot in them, and I joined the McDonald's franchise, and because me, Richard, likes hamburgers with beetroot, I'm going to sell my hamburgers from McDonald's with beetroot. It's not in the recipe. I can't do it. It's not proven. I shouldn't do it. So really, it's so important that one gets the franchisee to follow that model. And the franchisor is incumbent on, first of all, creating the model or designing the recipe and testing it and refining it all the time. Because, again, probably use Cash Converters, given that we've been around for 30 years, the business today doesn't reflect anything to what it was 30 years ago when I opened that first store at Barrow. It's amended, it's changed, it's adapted to the changing circumstances of the customer base, the requirements, the environment, and everything like that. So the franchisor needs to do that. He's then, or she's then, part of their role is to ensure that the individual franchisees understand the why, understand the what, and understand the how. And that is all about training. So we spend an enormous amount of time 2 months beforehand with our new franchisees, effectively 2 weeks in theory with our exco here in Johannesburg, and a 6-week period of time where they pitch at 8 o'clock in the morning, they leave at 7 o'clock at night in our corporate stores to take the theory and implement it practically in the store. And then we have a store development manager who's with that franchisee for a month before he opens, a month after he opens, all day, every day. And then as that franchisee gets to understand with his team the model more and more, and it becomes almost habitual and muscle memory, then we pull back the support step by step by step, because clearly the guy who's been around for 30 years, I don't need to go into his store and tell him how to run a cash converters. But the lady who's just opened up 30 days ago, I've got to be there and hold her hand much more than currently. So it's age and stage appropriate.
Okay, no, perfect. Thanks for that clarity. I appreciate. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Eva.
Richard. Hi, Richard.
Yes, Fred. I've got Eva on my screen, but her mic is muted.
So you can hear me.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
So you can hear me?
Fred, I can hear you. Yeah, you
Yes,
shall
we're
we
just
give?
asking Ava for a question quickly.
Yes, I just want to ask a question.
Yes, in a moment.
How long does it take to create culture in a business?
Okay,
Yes,
Eva, we're going to
to
come
Sorry,
back to you
Eva,
shortly.
we'll come back
Okay.
to you.
No worries.
Oh.
Fred's question is, how long does it take to create culture in a business? Fred, I
A
don't think
sustainable
it's
one.
Yeah, I don't think it's an event. I think it's a process. And I think you create culture every day, and you layer it and you build on top of it and you reconfirm it. And it really is every time you sit around and make a decision that requires a judgment call and reflect that judgment against your values and your culture. And if you're not value set compliant and somebody doesn't stick up their hand and say, that doesn't fit with our values, well, then it's part of relearning the culture. It's part of ensuring that we're always focusing on what we do, how we do it, and how things get done around here. That's, it's not an event, it's a process. And I don't think you ever put a full stop to it and then say, okay, we've built the culture, let's move on.
Or maybe a follow-up question. How do you then value your culture to your business? Because why I'm asking this, there are institutions or organizations or businesses that we were told or we have learned through our processes that you get to feel the culture at the door. Once you open the door, you step your foot in, then you have to feel the difference between the street and the business entrance. So do you have a way to assess or to monitor or to value how culture is to your business?
Fred, I think that's also possibly a topic for a doctoral thesis. I don't think there's a simple answer to the question. I think observation is probably something that you could use to try and measure or determine whether the individuals are practicing the culture that you'd like them to practice, or what we call on brand. Are you on brand? Is that behavior on brand, or is it not on brand? So maybe as a silly example, in the context of integrity and honesty, the industry that we're in is buying and selling second-hand household goods, and clearly a country like South Africa, in fact anywhere around the world, the risk is of buying stolen goods. So what we do, particularly with our guys in the buy shop, is we start with a why. You cannot buy stolen goods because integrity and honesty is one of our values. It's part of our culture, and as a consequence, you don't do that. How do you not do that? We teach you how to do it, how to observe whether something may be stolen or not, and we put procedures and processes in place to stop that. If we find that an individual buyer in an individual store is not complying to that process, well, then it's a relatively simple decision that we need to take. And we recognize that that individual is not being value set compliant, and take the actions that we need to take. So it's I'm not sure that I can give you a single straightforward answer in this process, besides the fact that it is a process, it's not an event, and it's something that again starts with the guy at the top. I've got to continuously ensure that I'm behaving in such a way that is value set compliant, that reinforces our culture, and everybody that follows with me should be doing the same thing.
Thank you.
Right, Eva, shall we go to you?
Thank you, Richard. That was really great. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't know if my question will come through clearly. So in our industry, the why is very important right from the beginning. It's very driven on experience and qualifications and legislation. And I was wondering, I understand that, so you take your franchisees through a 2-week period where they really understand the culture, etc. At the process of engaging with someone that might become a franchise in your company, does the why come up? In our company, it pretty much starts there. Otherwise, it becomes a baptism by fire. What people see on television about being successful in real estate, it's not quite the same. So we have to start with the why all the time. So that's the first question. And then second to that, I find that many years later, when it comes time to have a conversation with our clients about recommitting, renewing their franchise agreement, or when we see that their business is pretty much in ICU, the why comes up again. There isn't clarity, or maybe we're forgetting why they got into the business in the first place. Have you ever dealt with that? And is it as simple as reigniting their why for the future of our partnership?
Yeah. Two very interesting questions. So to start with, when we're interviewing prospective franchisees, first of all, we take that as really a fundamental part of our business. It's so important. So your business and my business are exactly the same. You might be selling property and I'm selling secondhand toasters, but the franchisor's business is the same business model. Our success is based on our franchisees' success. And as a consequence, and if you think that culture is so important, when you start interacting with a prospective franchisee, it's really important for them to understand why we do what we do. So first of all, myself and our national marketing manager do the franchise sales side of things and the franchise selection. We will go through a very vigorous process with those individuals, starting with a 2.5-hour session at head office where we'll have a face-to-face interview. And one of the first things that we start with is explaining to our prospective franchisees why we do what we do. We have what we call a value set presentation that we present to the individuals, and we go through the process of our values and our culture and our why and the like. And we get a common understanding that the individual can understand the why and will buy into it, because as you rightfully say, if they get that, then everything follows from it. Why am I doing what I'm doing is really important to understand. Then the second part of your question, in terms of when you come to the franchise agreement renewal period, or if the store's in ICU, what we tend to find is that again, this is a process, not an event, that all the way through the relationship with the franchisee, you're needing to reconfirm all the time why you're doing what you're doing in that particular environment. And what we found is that sometimes the penny drops the first time, or not the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth, and the sixth time you say the same thing, it drops. And what we've experienced is that at the time that you said it the first time, when they didn't get it, there was something else going on in their head. There was something else that was more important. They just didn't get it. And so repetition in the process of franchising, we think, is really important. Literally saying the same thing over and over again to somebody from different perspectives, or different people communicating the same thing as well. Sometimes my communication to you on a particular topic may not land as well as I think, but if somebody else was talking to you on the same topic, you would relate better to them and understand it at a deeper level. As well as when day one, when you're talking to an individual, and day 5, when they've been in your organization, they understand a lot more at a more fundamental level after 5 years of selling property than they did when they first spoke to you, assuming they weren't in property before they came to Century 21.
Right.
So I think the answer is repetition. So not necessarily saying it the same way, but talking to the topic on a regular basis. Yeah. And they need
Thank
to
you.
buy
That's
into it.
really simple, but not obvious. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions for Richard? We are running a little bit over time, so I don't think we'll do breakout rooms today. What I'd like to do is for us just to share some golden nuggets. Anyone who would like to stay afterwards to have a chat with Richard, you're more than welcome to stay behind. And then I've just posted the link for the feedback survey. If you could take a minute just to complete the feedback survey on today's session so that we know how we could, so we can know where to make improvements and how you enjoyed the event. I'm going to close the session for today. If you'd like to stay behind to ask Richard any questions, you're welcome to do so. I'm going to close the meeting for today with Fred. Fred, you want to hand over to Fred to close the meeting?
I would like to thank everyone who attended, took time to listen to us, and I think we will continue to have these sessions. I think for us is to how we position it. This is part of our culture, by the way. Then, most importantly, I would like to inform delegates that the association took the decision to start recruiting franchisees. This has been long overdue. We will admit franchisees as members, and I think we will get franchisees to add value to the industry. We understand their role. So look out for communication in that regard, because we think it is important that we have all role players who will come into the association and make us drive franchising to bigger and higher heights. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Right, meeting's closed for today. Thank you, everyone who joined, and
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David, Chris,
Thank
and
you.
Richard. See you again.
Thank you.